In this lesson, we're going to talk about smoothing out geometry. Alright, so in the last lesson we had learned how to create these buttons using primitives. Now we used a standard cylinder primitive to create these. The one thing that we notice is that they are more of this octagon shape, okay, and that's not really conveying that it's a round button. And in matter of fact, I probably wouldn't really want to put my fingers on that, as it's very, very sharp. So what I want to do is I want to smooth this out. And instead of continuing to add geometry to this to smooth it out, what I'll do is I'll use a modifier to help me out in this process. So let's go ahead and select this middle one first. And we're going to go to our modifier list, and we're going to scroll down, and we're going to go to Turbo Smooth. Left click on that, and you'll notice that it appears to be smoothed out. Now it has added geometry to this, and that's perfectly fine. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. But it puts it, it smooths it out in a mathematical way based on the way that we've created it. Now, the really great thing about this is I could go ahead and bump up the iterations of this Turbo Smooth and get it as smooth as I would like. Now, you don't want to sit here and continue to bump up the iterations if it's not absolutely necessary. You'll notice that there's not much difference between 2 and 3. Okay? You really won't be able to see that. So we're just going to stay at an iteration of 2. Let's also go down to the base and let's apply that Turbo Smooth as well. Now one thing that I want you to notice is that as you add a Turbo Smooth to one of these objects, notice that it adds it to the other because they are all linked together as an instance. Let's also bump up the iterations here and set that to 2. Now we have these nice smooth buttons. Now there may be some loss of form whenever you apply the Turbo Smooth modifier, and that's exactly what it's supposed to do. But there may be some instances where you want to retain some detail. So for example, the tops of the buttons at that ridge, it doesn't really look as thick as I would like it to be. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Edit Poly. You'll notice that it reverts back to what it looked like before the Turbo Smooth. And now what I can do is I can make some changes to the model. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to go to Polygon Mode. Now for some reason it's not showing me Polygon Mode. A way that we can get around this, I think it's a bug, a way that we can get around this is to go into Isolate Mode. Isolating that out will show us the shaded view of that. Let's go ahead and hit Grow, and I'm going to grow this up to this point. Then I'm going to grab my Scale tool and I'm going to scale it along the X and Z, or X and Y, excuse me. So we'll scale that in, and notice that we'll get this thicker rim across the top of the button. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. Okay, might bring it in a little bit more. Now if it helps, if you want to see the end result of that while you're working, you could always hit Show End Result. That will show you what it looks like smoothed out, and then you can make your adjustments that way. So with that, let me go ahead and bring that back in just a little bit. I don't want the ridge to be that extreme, and that looks pretty good. So now let's turn off Polygon Mode, and there we have our button. Let's also turn off Isolate on that and go back to Turbo Smooth in our modifier stack. And there we go. So now we have those buttons. They look nice and crisp and nice and neat. Alright, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and duplicate these buttons one more time. So hold down Control and left click on those. Grab your Move tool. With all of those selected, I would like to keep them as a group. And so instead of selecting each individual one all the time, I'm going to make them into a group. So to group, we'll simply come up to Group and hit Group. Give it a name, and we'll call this Buttons. And I'll do _GRP for group, just so it's easily identified. Now with that, we'll hold down Shift, and we'll drag that out. And I'm going to place it right about here. You'll notice that we have a new name with these numbers at the end telling us that that is a group, and I'm going to set that as an instance. So if I happen to change anything, it's going to change it over here as well. Let's hit OK. Alright, perfect. Now at any time if you decide to ungroup these, all you have to do is simply go to Group and Ungroup, and that will get rid of your group controller that is on that. Now, if I need to modify anything inside of a group, let's say that I want to lower some of these elements, what I can do is simply go to Open, and that will allow me to access the individual pieces of the group. So now what I want to do is I want to just lower those a little bit, and let's make sure that we're looking at the other side and seeing if those are lowering as well. You'll notice that as I move these down, those are not lowering. Why? Well, any time that we create an instance of geometry, it only instances the position of the vertices or the polygons. Okay, so if I make changes to the vertices, it will go ahead and update over there, but not necessarily their position, rotation, or scale. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the same thing over here. Let's go to Group. Whoops, not Ungroup. Let's go to Group and Open. Select the tops of those buttons, and then we'll simply lower that into our buttons there. And it looks like something else is moving there. Let's try this one more time. Let's select this. There we go. Oh, I accidentally grabbed the group. So if you happen to select the pink bounding box, that selects the entire group again. We just want to make sure that we select the individual pieces. Lower that down. And we'll just kind of lower it a little bit. It doesn't have to be too much. And there we go. So now what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have one of those objects selected inside of that group, and we want to go back to Group and Close. So that way we are no longer affecting the individual pieces. Let's go to Group and Close. There we go. All right, so we've learned about how to smooth out geometry using Turbo Smooth, how to do that properly without smoothing something out too much and crashing our computer. And we've also talked about how to work with groups of objects, and then also how they are affected whenever we create instances of those objects. All right, so now that we've done the buttons, let's go ahead and create out the joysticks that we'll find in our arcade cabinet. And we'll get started with that next.